GM friends, and welcome to the future of gaming. You're listening to our weekly blockchain gaming rollup. It is today, where I am, Thursday, the 8th of September. We've got Philip Collins, we've got Devin Becker, we've got myself, Nico Vereecke. Today, we are talking about Soccerverse Beta and, in general, sports games, which they're everywhere. Like blockchain gaming, like sports games. People are really into that, it seems. We'll talk about crypto unicorns, new game modes, and Xterio. So Xterio raises a lot of money, and they also have their white paper out, which we dug into a bit. Devin, you're in Pennsylvania right now, East Coast.
Yep.
How's life there?
It's actually kind of better for me time zone wise, as you both know. I'm a bit of a night owl, and being on the East Coast means like I'm actually finally kind of lined up with everyone for the most part. So it's nice when I get like people normally were scheduling stuff at noon, and I'm just like, oh, I got to be up at noon. Now I'm like 3 p.m. Okay, I could do that. So it's actually it's kind of nice because I was really a struggle before working with East Coast people, but I'm only here temporarily till the end of the week. So I will be back in the old Bat Cave soon.
Nice. Good. All right, let's dive in. So the first topic I wanted to discuss is a discussion we're having in our Discord in the Unchained Games channel. We were talking about a game that has their beta right now. It's a game called Soccerverse. It's built by a company called Xaya, Xaya. They were one of the first people to actually build Unchained games. In 2018 or something. And so now they have a football manager that is now in beta, and it's a on-chain football manager. So we've already discussed a bunch of other football managers where you can own a club, you can own players. And so what they did is they've put all of that on-chain. So every club is sort of a DAO. Every player is sort of a DAO. If you own a player, you can assign a manager, or you can appoint a manager. So if you own a player, you can ask to be the manager of that player. All of the other owners can vote on you. And then, you can decide if the player is happy or unhappy, and then you can, incentivize him to, or incentivize clubs to buy him and stuff like that. So it's a really interesting concept. It's fully on chain. So there's a lot of like MetaMask transactions that you have to sign. It's on Polygon, I believe. It's interesting, right? Everything happens on chain. So I think every few days there's match results that get calculated by smart contracts. And, between you and me, I haven't looked at the smart contract, so I haven't verified if everything is fair and provable. But it led to a bit of a discussion because one of our other founding nerds at the Fog now, Jasper, he works at Futium. And Futium is another football manager game or soccer manager game, but it's not fully on-chain. So there's actually gameplay that happens off-chain, which means that it's smoother to play. Right, you don't have to sign as many transactions, and so I'd love to have your thoughts on whether on-chain is actually like beneficial given the worse UX, and how you see this moving forward.
Yeah, I think when I think of fully on-chain, a lot of the times I do view it as pushing the technology of blockchain almost to its limits in terms of how it's integrated within games, and it's an interesting use case today. I do struggle, to your point, on like a potentially inferior UX with all of the wallet transactions and signatures that you need to place for things to happen. It almost seems like a initial test that works over the next 6 to 12 months, and eventually will fall out of favor unless you're able to find ways to make the on-chain user experience more seamless. And then I think you lose a lot of the downside and maintain all of the transparency. But yeah, and in a lot of these early games, it almost seems like they're truly trying to appeal to this wave one of the crypto crowd that is very much about, being true to the ethos of being transparent and everything being visible to everyone and data availability. But yeah, I mean, I think over time, people are not going to be willing to sacrifice the UX for being fully on chain.
Yeah, I almost feel like this is something almost more like Dwarf Fortress, where it's like, it's really cool and it's awesome that it exists, and I love this kind of stuff, and it's great to see, great to talk about, great to try, but it's like, it's not mass appeal, which is fine. Like, this is pushing the envelope. This is like trying to see what the technology can do and build around that, and it's going to be a niche thing, but it's like, there's so many sports games and things like that that it's okay, I think, to have some niche ones too. Like or niche. Sorry, I don't want to pronounce it wrong forever. But so, not every single one of them has to appeal to the same demographic of people, right? Like, there's plenty of soccer managers. There's plenty of things that they could do better or worse than others. Better animations or better UX or the licensed things or whatever. There's lots of different ways you can appeal to different audiences, and I think it's good. Also, that this is a different genre from Dark Forest to kind of expand out the different types of things we can do on the chain. But I think overall down the road, I think we start to see like some existing genres really heavily adapted to on-chain, or just brand new genres coming from the on-chain world. Because I think trying to adapt the existing ones is going to run into the comparative problem where you're looking at like this compared to that when you're looking at the UX and stuff like that. But if it's a brand new genre and the UX gets better incorporated into the game design, things like that, and you start to push in a very different direction. Like, remember when mobile first came out and people were trying to, when the App Store part came out and people were trying to bridge over games. Like, they're trying to find different ways to bring games over, and the UI UX was pretty bad because they were trying to do stuff like virtual joypads and like trying to figure out how to incorporate touch into games where it didn't make sense, trying to figure out the gesture language. I feel like we're in that same phase when it comes to on-chain games where it's like, yeah, you can try and adapt some stuff. It's going to be clunkier. Like, maybe down the road it'll be smoother. But overall, like, it's going to be better when it's like its own thing, when like it develops its own genres, or when it twists an existing genre to the point where it's a new subgenre. And mobile's done that very well. And I can see the on-chain doing that as well, but I don't see that happening like soon. But if people don't do these kinds of things, we're not going to see it ever, right? So I like kudos to them for doing it, and I actually would look forward to trying it. But I don't expect it to be like you're not going to see people on the subway playing this, on their phones, like on their daily commute. It's just not that kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that's weird about a lot of blockchain projects that I'm seeing recently, and something that I've been having more conversations around, is a lot of people are almost trying to solve for the Web3 adoption dilemma by adding complexity to their projects, where they take something that exists today, they add a feature and then another feature and then another feature. And I think we're seeing this in a space like soccer or football, where there's so many people pursuing this that everyone's trying to differentiate in incremental ways. And eventually you have so many features that you look back and it's like, oh, isn't that a really cool product? And it's like, in theory, this is really cool, but in adding all of these different layers, you've now made things so complex to the point that it's borderline unusable and just more confusing. And so you go like full circle of, on the novelty scale, it's very high. On the functional scale, it's very low. And that's almost like an academic approach to blockchain, where you've done all of these incorporations, and then it's like, yeah, but what are we gonna do with that? And who's gonna use it?
Is it maybe where these teams are looking at EVE Online and like, it's such a complex and deep game, it takes you so long to get into, but it's proven to work because there's still, I don't know, like 100,000 or something people playing that. And it's really hard to get
100,000 people to be like proven to work, right? Like most people consider that a failure by the way people like have these expectations of being like the next huge thing, right? Like I guess is where you set your bar at.
Yeah. I'd like to give love to share my view on chain and, like provable randomness and fairness. So I think, I asked you guys whether the fact that it's on-chain makes sense or is an advantage given worse UX. And so I think I agree with your point. I think especially at the moment when there's not a lot of value being transacted in some of these games, having it on-chain is a net disadvantage given that the UX is just worse. One of the things that I've seen being worked on, and I'm not sure if this works on L1, but I know it works on ZK Rollup L2s, is session keys, which means that you sign in once, and then as long as you're signed in, you can auto sign transactions. And so, that makes it so that you don't have to, every time you do something, verify or like approve a transaction, which makes a huge difference UX wise. There's more stuff happening as well where some teams, bundle transactions into a ZK proof in the client. So this is something, for example, that, a team that I'm working with is working on. And so, I think there will be a lot of advancements made on the user experience and user interface side that at some point, I think the difference between having it on and off chain is going to be minimal. And I think at that point, games that involve quite some value, like for example, like a big soccer management ecosystem in game, because it's actually like interesting, right? So you can own a club and then you can manage the club, and as the better the club performs, like you can buy better teams, the more like more money you earn and stuff like that. And so I really get the appeal. It's literally like if you take the existing sports or soccer ecosystem and you just bring it on chain and turn it into a game. I can see that grow, and if it becomes like, if it grows fast and very big, then I could see some serious money like going on in there. And at that point, I do believe it's very valuable to have stuff happening on chain.
There's you bring up a good point. There's no reason why you can't do that auto sending transaction thing across many other wallets, right? That could be a feature in MetaMask, for example. It's literally like, because essentially the way signing works is something like MetaMask or other wallets, they're storing your private key for you and then using that to help you sign it. There's no reason they can't do that automatically. It's literally not a technical problem. It's literally just a UI UX thing. And in fact, Wax does that. So if you've ever used the Wax Cloud wallet, you can check the box to have it automatically sign the same type of transaction from then on. And they did that with Wax to make things smoother. That has its own weird problems, but the idea has already been there for quite some time in Wax as well. And I don't think it's like there's anything preventing it from working on L1s or anything else. It's literally just a wallet feature anyone can implement in whatever wallet. And I agree that that's like a really good point, that should be something we start to see more. If that starts to become a UX problem, like that's easily solvable. Obviously, that can lead to its own fraud things, and you have to implement it carefully. But like as a general concept of like sign in and session timeouts and things like that, it's like that's very well known in the space. So I really hope we see that in something like MetaMask.
Mm-hmm. It is actually really risky. For example, Phantom, which is the leading Solana wallet, used to have a accept all or auto accept all transactions from this website or something function, and that was abused, obviously, until they actually had to remove it from the wallet and the extension. So that stuff can be very dangerous, and so it has to be used well. That's my thoughts. Phil, what do you think? You think having these things fully on chain bears merit?
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases it depends on the use cases. I think we covered this a few weeks ago with something like an ice poker and Decentral games on Decentraland. Having the provably fair odds when you're dealing with significant financially driven products, that matters, right? I think that's a key use case that actually adds value compared to casinos that are oftentimes viewed as black boxes. So yeah, I mean, I think on a lot of these blockchain platforms that are very financially driven in terms of a lot of the value to the player or gamer is in the transacting and the opportunity to not only buy and sell, but trade assets and kind of win the game by progressing financially. I think there's merit there. I'm still kind of torn on how important it is from like an anti-cheat and a lot of other use cases, to be honest. But I mean, at least on like the financial forward projects, I think it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I mean, on the rest, on like the long tail of projects where maybe it's helpful to have things on chain, I'm not sure if I really get particularly excited about that, but I don't have too strong of an opinion there yet.
Mm-hmm. Talking about on chain, it brings me to a small topic I'd like to touch upon. We have found a game that is more for nerds than Dark Forest.
Oh boy, I know where this is going.
Yes. Oh yes. So Dark Forest, as many of you will probably know, is maybe the first like fully on-chain game. It's built by a bunch of degens. And it's fully on-chain game. It works in seasons. We've already talked about it. I believe it's super interesting. I did an interview on the Metacast with one of the creators. His name is Justin Glibbert. And the dudes building this are absolutely brilliant, out of this world. Like IQ 160 plus, all of them. It's insane. Anyway, so that game you need to understand blockchain pretty well. There's people building bots to win the game, and basically you can't win the game if you're not using or leveraging bots to do like strategic decisions for you. Now, that's like, and the people playing that, big nerds, we found a game that requires you to be more of a nerd than that. It's a game called 0x Monaco. and it is like a racing simulator where they require you to write smart contract code to input a team into the game. So you need to write code to make a move essentially, and to I don't know how to describe it. You have to build a car or a team around a car or something, and then that your smart contract will play for you in that game. And it's really interesting, and it's obviously it's a game, but it's not really a game. And I think it's more of a way to look for either for nerds to compete or to find nerds that are very smart, and then try to have them build shit that actually makes sense, I guess.
I wouldn't say it's not a game, although it does lean more towards competition. But I only say this because I've been programming for well over 2 decades, and I've played plenty of these kinds of games over the years where you program as part of the game, right? Where it's almost like these kind of competition sort of things where people are programming some sort of bot or whatever, like Core Wars or AI Fleet Commander. All these, there's this long series of games that have always kind of existed doing that sort of thing. As each new kind of generation of technology comes about, someone finds some way to write one of these kind of games. And I think they're really cool for that specific niche of people. I've definitely played them. I'm not a super programming nerd, but I do think the idea is really cool, and I think it is fun to play those because you start getting really hacky in kind of a fun way, where it pushes you not just in terms of your skill as a programmer, but it actually forces you to explore the boundaries of the programming language, the environment, the rule set, and it even more so than Dark Forest. Dark Forest already kind of does that to some extent, right? Where, like you said, if you're not playing with bots, you're kind of playing with disadvantage. Whereas something with OX Monaco, it is the whole point is to really push the boundaries of everything and look for edge cases and things like that. And those kinds of things actually really are great for building up people that are going to be great for say cybersecurity for smart contracts and stuff like that, or be great auditors, because they start to learn all the quirks of Solidity and the blockchain and stuff like that they can abuse and that others can abuse, and it becomes very, very valuable. Maybe Nico was hinting at, it becomes a great recruiting tool as well, of course. But I think these kinds of things are almost always necessary to sort of exist to give a fun outlet for these people. You remember the TV shows where it's just robots battling each other that are almost like little Roomba kind of things. Were great for robot engineers and these sorts of things where you're sort of pitting your intellect against other people in these areas. I'd still definitely classify them as games. They just act as sort of this ongoing competition.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it almost seems like community research projects. And again, going back to the academic point, it's not something that is going to get mass scale. I don't think you do this and build it out to be a billion-dollar business and have a bunch of VC funds throwing a ton of money at it for years. But I think there's a lot of cool stuff that can come out of it, despite being incredibly niche. So I think there's on the surface, it's kind of why does this need to exist? But I mean, who knows? The types of insights you can glean from the people that are building on that platform. It's a very high IQ group, as Nico mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Good. And one more thing I want to talk about with regards to not Unchained, but we were talking about sports games. Sorare partnership with the NBA. So we're putting basketball on Sorare as well. I was in Paris about a month ago, or a bit more than a month, and I was at the Sorare offices, and they were mentioning we are going to partner with or there's going to be a new sport on Sorare, but they didn't want to say which one. And then I'm there, and suddenly I see a dude walk in who's 2.30 m, tall. He's insanely tall, and at that point, I could guess where we were going when I saw that dude walk around the Sorare offices. So if you want to have insights into what game's going to be next in Sorare,
way to stereotype, Nico.
That's true. That's very true. It's good kind of stereotyping, no? It's if you know a tall dude, it's oh, do you play basketball?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, so any thoughts on the NBA partnership for Sorare?
I mean, sports just continue to be an onboarding case. It seems sports like basketball, American football, global football. I think people love using these representations of athletes because they're familiar, and the demographic that follows sports oftentimes is maybe highly likely to be more inclined towards crypto or more open to adopting crypto. And so it just seems like a big marketing expense for adoption. And I mean, it'll continue to be used. Was it Binance that's working with like Ronaldo or something? And I'm sure they're signing these crazy contracts with these guys because they're such a figurehead and they just like exude trust to this high quality and high LTV demographic. That every time I see a sports thing, that's like instantly what I go to is like marketing. And nothing wrong with that, but that's kind of like where I leave it off in my mind.
Yeah, I think it's funny though, because we're starting to see the point where people are going to be competing to an extent where like there's multiple games within the same sport. So like in a way, even like NBA Top Shot is a competitor, right? Even though it's not a fantasy sport or even a game, it's just the idea of the sports interaction on collectibles and things like that is spreading pretty fast amongst these, like to the point where Splinterlands was going to be making multiple sports games, and it's going to get competitive amongst these to get these deals, to negotiate these contracts, which is, I guess, great for the sports organizations, right? Because then they all of a sudden have leverage, can negotiate better deals and stuff because people want those sports in there. And it is kind of funny to see sports because there was this kind of tradition, maybe going back to like the 80s and 90s where we had this kind of like jocks versus nerds sort of thing. But over time, fantasy sports really bridged the gap between nerds and jocks. Like it is the nerd version of jocks, like sports people like that are into fantasy sports. And baseball, of course, was like a big part of that bridge. And I think we talked about that a little bit when we were talking about the MLB deal. But this idea of like stats and following things and being super nerdy about the sport, like knowing all the players, even though it's more of like a people thing and like a dude kind of thing or whatever, sometimes it's still very nerdy in a way. Like you're still like obsessing over something. Yeah, maybe it's not like Star Trek, but it's still a little bit of fantasy there. It's still a little bit of like kind of trying to participate in a world that you're not actually part of. And I think there is some of that, like sort of living out your fantasy like by proxy with these people. And that is a great bridge, like bringing people into crypto that way. Sorare does it in a very light way, and so I think Sorare is a great gateway because they don't involve too much crypto. Like the crypto's there so trading can happen, right? Like they keep it pretty simple. It's not very complicated. They're not using the blockchain for everything. It's more like you can do cool trading. Their trading system is pretty good and pretty robust, with the ability to like do the auctions and for the minting, and then do the trading and swapping and all that sort of stuff. I think it's a great platform, and I might expect we'll see more, but I think that one to go across multiple sports is a great example, and I think will benefit the ecosystem overall, especially being an Ethereum-based one, right? Post-merge, it becomes even more doable, and I actually look forward to them continuing to accrue sports to them, like, or maybe even wrestling or whatever else, like, right? They expanding out because it's such an easy onboarding platform, and the way they've built it is so flexible because it's just basically trading cards and fantasy spots that they could expand to esports. They could expand to other non-traditional sports. There's a lot of room for growth there that I think makes it easy for them to expand out to a bigger audience. And I think it's only good for us as an industry.
It's also a very logical fit where if you think of like professional sports, you have a finite number of professional athletes per sport, and there's already a perceived value of what those players are worth. So you're gonna value Messi a lot higher than a second league player that you've never heard of, and so there's already like an arbitrary scale of value, and theoretically that can be infinitely scalable. So it does make sense for like an initial use case of NFT. So it's kind of unsurprising from that standpoint as well.
Here's a quick twist though that I just thought of. Like they went from being like supporting a more of a worldwide sport with soccer to all of a sudden two US centric ones with MLB and NBA, which are both US centric. So I'm curious how that will affect the uptick. I've followed a bit of the sort of metrics of Sorare in terms of like NFT volume, things like that, as I do as part of Navic, and I've noticed they haven't gotten a huge upswing out of MLB, but they definitely have done better in sort of like the downturn market, and in terms of like where NFT trade volume is hugely down. They have benefited quite a bit from expanding out their sports. But I think with it being US-centric, it didn't explode as big as, say, like the initial stuff or even NBA Top Shot's kind of appeal to this broader audience. And I'm curious if NBA will have a broader appeal than MLB. I mean, MLB obviously might have some appeal in like other countries like Japan, for example, that are really into baseball. But I'm curious, I don't know, because I'm not a sports nerd, where NBA has appeal worldwide or not. Like, obviously, we know that there's like, NBA players that do play in other countries, and there was the whole deal with China and the NBA and stuff that sort of went back and forth. But I'm really curious to see where the worldwide appeal is.
Basketball's become actually surprisingly global, I think, in scope over the last decade or so. And I think one thing that's interesting is the NBA, for example, is making a massive push towards becoming more international. They have NBA Africa. They're constantly trying to increase their presence and exposure. I wonder if they're actually very excited about this because, the audience that has a big portion of the audience that has been excited about NFTs and what you can get with them has been fairly international, and maybe that's a spearhead for some of those markets for the NBA, and that's what gets them, excited about the partnership.
Yeah, I believe last year or 2 years ago, Sorare raised a huge round at a multi-billion-dollar valuation, and at that point, I was like, "What the hell? Why do they why this valuation? It's just insane." Because I thought of Sorare as mostly like football focused, and then they I don't know who I was talking to. Then they told me but they sell it as a platform to build out more sports related franchises and ecosystems, because they have both the platform for it, right? The technology is there. They can they have the NFTs, and then they can easily build some kind of competition around it, or some kind of game around it. And then they also have the ability to do the partnerships and a proven track record of good partnerships with these sports teams, mainly in Europe initially. And it's not easy to get these partnerships. I met with their growth lead, Brian O'Hagan, a few weeks ago, and he told me the story of the founder, Nicolas Julia of Sorare, who actually his first partnership was with the Belgian football league. So here where I live. And he told me that no one wanted to talk to him because this was 2017, 2018, super early. And the Belgian dude was like, you know what? Why not? Just give it a try. And that's where it all kicked off. And he had trouble. But now, you sign one, you sign another, it gets easier and easier. And I think now they're probably looking to have a bunch of sports on there. Question for you. I just Googled the biggest or the most watched sports. So soccer is number 1. Number 2 and 3. You both get 2 guesses. Let's see if you get it. Phil, what do you think?
Basketball and cricket.
Okay. Devin?
Honestly, I would say the same thing, although maybe I'll put cricket above basketball. But otherwise, I would say that sounds about right.
Okay. So cricket's very correct. Cricket's number 2, 2.5 billion fans. Basketball is a shared 9th spot.
Wow.
Number 3 is field hockey.
Oh.
Which I used to play, actually. I've played for 10 years. I was not very good. I'm going to be honest. Number 4 is tennis. 1 billion fans. We have volleyball, table tennis, baseball, golf, and then shared basketball and American football.
You've got ping pong way above basketball.
Sir.
That's crazy.
That's
all right. Well, then it is probably pretty US centric to some extent. Then
it is. But it also means that there's a huge opportunity out there for these more sports centric collectible games.
Nico, what it really means is they need ping pong next.
Yes,
true.
Dude, I wanna have the top ping ponger in the world. I have no idea who that is. Very stereotypical. I can imagine it's an Asian dude. Good.
So what's crazy? What is crazy? And talking about the Sorare validation of their prior valuations. I was looking up just sales of licensed merchandise across sports, and the first number that came up for me was about $32 billion in 2021, and 24% of that was apparel, for example. So if you buy into digital assets being an important part of the fan experience in the future, there's definitely a market there for licensed items. So it's there.
I think NFT is going to be such an unlock for fan engagement where, as a player, if you own my NFT, then I'll give you special access to shit. We can do Q&As, we can do metaverse parties. I don't know. I think it's going to be huge. So I can definitely get it. I just think it's a bit skeuomorphic. So, that's the other point I wanted to make around this. I think this is an incremental innovation, right? I think this being able to own, have digital versions of the old Panini cards that were huge here in Belgium. I was one of the few losers that didn't collect them, but all of my friends did. I think it fits NFTs, collecting fits NFTs. I don't think it's a full unlock. So I think the big unlock, the big innovation will come from somewhere else. But I love this because it is bringing bunch of people that don't want to be associated with NFTs, don't even know what NFTs are, and they're like, yo, I used to own like freaking Messi's Panini card. I can have that digitally and then start playing games with them. Hell yeah, sign me up. So makes me happy.
Yeah, same.
Good. All right, next, Crypto Unicorns new game mode. Devin, what can you tell us about it?
So I guess they decided, while we're taking our sweet time finishing the game, why not just release 4 new games? This is something we've actually seen quite a bit. Like games, I remember Soul Chicks was going to do their little mini game, and like it's a common thing now. It's like this. I was kind of referring to it as like an appetizer. Like it's this way of sort of like trying to get people full while they're waiting for the main course, which acts as a great delay tactic. And it's honestly, who it's really great for is contract developers. Like contract game developers this is like going to be their bread and butter, is developing these like lobby games for these people while they wait. Because obviously you don't want to detract from the main experience, right? You don't want to be like, oh, we're going to put our developers on doing this other thing, because fans will just, like the NFT holders will like have your head at that point if you're like, oh, we're just going to go do this instead of finishing the game, right? Like that's bad. So it just ends up falling on these contract developers to sort of, I'd say, but kind of shovel out these games. And I think for right now, honestly, and I doubt Crypto Unicorns is going to be much different, most of these are going to kind of be shit games. Like realistically, like they're not going to be great. They're not going to be developed with like being a full product themselves. And so there's not going to be the same level of effort there. Not to mention it's going to have to come out of the game developer's budget. Doesn't matter that a contractor's doing it. Someone's paying for that, right? Someone's paying that contractor to make it, which means Crypto Unicorns is then taking that money that you spent on your unicorn, and instead of spending it to improve the development of the game, they're developing other mini games, right? Because Coda and Iguanabee or whatever are not developing these out of the kindness of their own heart, or because they're NFT holders and they just want the utility, right? So it is great though for expanding in our interoperability stuff, and that's where I get excited about it. But overall, like they're just trying to appeal to like the holders and maybe a little bit of other people, like hoping other people will be like, oh, what are these unicorn things? Let me go buy some of these. But then they're going to see the prices are going to be like, F that. Like, I'm just going to play this hyper casual game and I'm probably not going to buy them. And but I mean, we saw this in the past, like say, for example, with like Skylanders, where there was like the mobile game, like on iPad, you could just hook up like a little portal and actually take your Skylanders from like the console game and play them in like the mobile game. But the utility for the actual figures was so low because the amount of effort is just never there, right? It's just like, oh yeah, you could play with your unicorn in the game, but it's like maybe it's visually represented, but the actual utility isn't really there. Like whatever you did for breeding and the genes and all that stuff doesn't end up mattering much. And so it's just a low effort thing. And that's what kind of disappoints me a little bit. Now I'm saying this, of course, without knowing the details of these games outside of like a 2-sentence description at most, right? Mm-hmm. But I've seen the history of this sort of thing, and like logistically, I just have very low expectations for it. But hey, I hope I'm wrong. Like, I hope these games are like awesome. But they're slated for Q4 this year, so this is not like 2024. We're gonna have like a metaverse kind of BS we usually hear, right? This is like, oh, we're gonna pump these out soon.
Lobby games. I'm noting that down, and I'm gonna be using that more often. This really good term. It's really interesting because I think you made me realize that as a team, I'm usually like, if a team comes to me and asks should we sell NFTs, like way before the real full game is out. Right now, I'm usually hesitant because I think there's the dynamics in the market with all of the speculators make it so that like it's just risky, right? Either the price goes up too much and then people have unfair expectations about like revenue potential of the NFTs that you sold, or the price goes down and then people think your game failed while you're like still building it. And so like if you sell NFTs, like you can actually make money and you can start generating revenue by incentivizing people to trade or having people trade. But at that point, it also means that you will have to, start building lobby games. And so that's also an additional cost. So right, you can almost do a calculation of, okay, we're going to sell NFTs. This is what we expect to get from that. And then, this is the trading revenue that we expect to get. But then we'll need freaking lobby games because people are going to get bored with the simple game loop that we'll have in the beginning. And that's going to cost us money as well. And I think those games won't be revenue drivers. It's literally as you say. It's like the elevator music of the game industry or something.
Yeah, it's Kickstarter stretch goals all over again, right? Where people did the stretch goals to generate additional revenue, but in doing so, they actually set themselves up to incur higher costs than they actually even made in profit by setting the stretch goals, because people get a little excited, they start promising all the world, and then then the lobby games come out, and then they have to like do that to buy themselves time, because they generally usually bite off more than they can chew, but they don't want to let the crowd down. They don't want to be like, oh, well, we sold a bad product. We want this value to stay up. We want to be able to continue to sell stuff to you beyond the initial pre-sales. And so they have to start buying themselves time. And I'm not saying for sure that's what they're doing, right? It's not like Crypto Unicorns came out and said, by the way, guys, we're buying ourselves time because we can't finish this game yet. But I think it's kind of implied to an extent, right?
Yeah. I have a recording in 12 hours with Aaron Beyer-Schmidt. I don't know how to pronounce that in English. Anyway, so he's the CEO of Laguna Games, the creator of Crypto Unicorns. And so I'll if I don't know what else to ask, I might ask like,
Spicy.
dude, what's up with these new games, man? Are these lobby games or what's going on? Let's see what.
Well,
he
you can't say they're lobby games though.
No.
Yeah.
So, but I like to ask these leading questions and then
poke him, see what he says.
Exactly. You have, man, the CEOs in general are also like always so good at answering these questions.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed. Like I get tough questions about like play to earn and does it make sense and all of that stuff. And then I tend to ask these questions to the people that I interview. And some of these people are like, they give the perfect answer. And I'm like,
it's practice half the time.
Yeah, it is practice. Good. Final piece of news. We still have some time left. Xterio raise. So we have two things to talk about. So one, the raise itself, and then we can go into their white paper. So I did I didn't do much digging, but Xterio published a Medium or article, or like it announced that it raised $40 million. It is I would categorize it as a Fun Plus spinoff. So I think these are. So the way I see this work is you have these big companies, FunPlus or like Ubisoft and or other types of players where, they see opportunity in Web3, but it's a risk to dedicate too much internal talent to that because they have other shit to build. And so, they build small teams that they then spin out of the company. They give them, resources, help. They obviously invest in that company as well. They own part of the shares or many. I don't know the exact dynamics there. And then those companies get to work on something that is like super degen. And then if they make a mistake, it doesn't reflect too badly on the parent company. And so Xterio's cross-platform portfolio will focus on multiplayer games with deep, rich gaming experience across multiple genres, enhanced by player ownership. And so that ownership kept coming back in the Medium article that they posted. Blockchain is a tool in our toolkits to provide a great experience and not the end goals, which is what we always say, which pretty much everyone always says. But it's mostly focused on ownership and the ability for you to resell what you bought. So it's the whole you buy something but what if you don't want to play the game anymore? Then you can't do anything with it. So the resellability and also out of that Medium post, our NFTs will be interoperable and provide real value. Real value, guys.
How much of that wasn't copy and pasted? From a million other articles and white papers and whatever.
I don't know. But yeah, so that's a raise. Curious, multiple games, interoperability. I don't think there's not much to say more about the raise, I'd say. But Devin, what did you pick or find out from the white paper?
What honestly screams out to me is and that article helps highlight it, honestly, is the lack of details. When they go, all these games, and it's going to be so interoperable, and blah, 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 but not a shred of detail. That is where I get concerned, right? Because the bigger the promise, the more detail needs to back it up, right? Or at least the more hint of detail where, there's something to actually chew on and speculate with, right? It's reading through the white paper, you realize they're talking a big game, but the details are really scant in terms of how they're going to back that up. The biggest flag for me is they talk about, and I see this all the time in white papers, this is a deflationary token system. That's my favorite word now because it's almost always not backed up. And so they talk about that and then immediately change the subject. And like there, it'll be deflationary through token burning, and then the word burning is never mentioned again. You have no idea how this burning is going to happen. There's no utility outside of staking actually mentioned. And so to me, like I find this, obviously you see this a lot too. I'm sure you guys do. Everyone gets excited about picks and shovels, right? When it comes to a big new technology gold rush, right? And I feel
That's
like
Phil.
you get these companies that do that. They go like,
Yeah.
they're like, oh my God, we can build this technology around it. We'll be the platform, and we'll like provide these tools, and everyone will use our stuff because it's so easy and great. And like the white paper half the time's like talking about how like awesome of an experience it's going to be and how easy it's going to make everything. But it's like, obviously it's 27 pages of not backing that up. Like there's no detail of how that's going to happen. And I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm saying like they're talking a big game, and I don't see a blueprint for it. I see like a lot of paragraphs of press release in that white paper, and some nice looking diagrams. They did have some cool stuff in there. I don't want to completely slag them off, but I think they had some like neat ideas behind like some of the interoperability technology of like storing value on chain shared amongst games to allow extra metadata to be shared and stuff like that. That sounded like a cool concept and was like one of the novel parts, but the rest of it just sounded like basically they were building a blockchain inside a blockchain. Like everything they were describing sounded like they were just trying to build an easy UX, like micro blockchain that they were considering like their own sort of economy, like that they were going to monetize. And like, I don't, honestly, I just don't buy it. I don't buy it working. And I think they're overly ambitious. And that 40 million is like a drop in the bucket compared to what they realistically need to build this.
Yeah, when I hear interoperability or see interoperability on pitch decks, a lot of times it falls into two buckets. The first is a closed loop where this company is going to build 20 small games and let you use the asset across those games. And the other is usually on the platform side where somebody's like, isn't it crazy that you can't use your assets everywhere? We're going to fix that. And all the time it's like, you kind of just don't get to like wave your wand and say, we're going to make this interoperable across all platforms. It's like the platforms as of today have to let you do that. Like there's no just magic wand where you can put your asset all across the board. And so I feel like interoperability has been historically a pretty significant buzzword in the space that we're operating in here. Not that there isn't a really cool opportunity in interoperability, but I feel like that's how I've historically seen it done, is closed loops where they're going to own the content, and these like kind of like pie in the sky visions of, it's so crazy this doesn't exist yet, we're going to fix that. And then when you start reading into it, it's like, wait, like this just, you can't do this. So I don't know, Nico, I don't know what you've seen, but those are my high level buckets on the interoperability front.
Yep, pretty much it. Question for you guys. Can we call it interoperability if it's within the ecosystem of one economic actor?
If it exists outside the game and then also exists inside another game, I'd say that is the base level definition, and I think that's fine. Like I still use the Skylanders example because like it was within one ecosystem of games. But I think they definitely proved a form of interoperability that had value. Like, and there was value there. Maybe you can like say the value sucked for whatever reason, depending on how they implemented it. But there was clearly something there, and I think NFTs can replicate that same thing. But I think at the same time, you end up with a situation where, as Phil was pointing out, when people try and talk about this closed loop economy of a bunch of games, and they have that in there because they call it the game gallery, right? Honestly, the games are almost always crap, right? Because they're more concerned with like getting like number of games and things like that than they are concerned with quality, right? Because quality takes a huge amount of time to build, right? Like if they were to actually build like say 20 games of high quality, we're looking at 10 plus years. Investors aren't going to like wait 10 plus years to get the return on that investment, right? So they're not going to be building 20 quality games. Like it's just not going to happen because realistically they need in order to prove the value of the interoperability, they need quantity, not quality, right? In terms of proving out their tech.
Yeah, and I think there's two different degrees of it where I think you can call it interoperability. And I think Devin's actually mentioned this in the past, where there's another word you can use for the closed loop, which is maybe like transferability across this platform, and interoperability is platform to platform. But those are definitely two very different steps and scopes for this type of functionality.
Yeah, and I think the idea is at the end of the day, they're going to push the other developers in the ecosystem to use the things, right? So if I make game A and it's the first game on the platform, right, I can't do any interoperability. right? Because there's no other games on the platform, so it doesn't make any sense. But game B, you better believe there's going to be a lot of pressure on game B to use as much from game A as possible, and even if game B doesn't want to, and then game C comes along, they're like, great, I got to use stuff from game A and B because I'm still in the small pool where I don't get my pick. And it's going to start to dictate things. They're going to be acting essentially as a publisher at that point and kind of forcing game design. And like, I mean, if you looked at like Infinite Arcade or any of these other ones that are just like, it's like Flash Portal days where it's just tons of like low quality content to try and prove out the value. And I tried a whole bunch of, Infinite Arcade games, and it's just like, it's almost more like knockoffs of existing games. And overall, like I love the ideas, but the realism kind of brings it down a notch, I think.
I also think that on the interoperability versus transferability point, it's interesting because to Devin's point, a lot of these closed loop ecosystems are a bunch of really simple games because you're focused on volume. And when you're focused on volume, it's more like the hyper casual model where you're expecting your users to churn, right? Somebody's not going to come to the simple game and play it for 2 years. They're going to come, and if you're lucky, if 5% of your users are there 30 days later, that's great for you. And so transferability almost reminds me more of like leaping from game to game. I'm going to play this game until I'm tired of it, and then we're going to keep them in our system and move them to this game. And so like they don't care if the game's good, they just want to keep you there. And so transferring from game to game as I jump versus, hey, I'm going to go from Fortnite to Roblox to insert any other platform and take my asset with me. I think those are two very different use cases. And I think the true interoperability side is much more compelling, but also much harder.
And it's also going to suck for the game developers when they're constantly churning people because like they couldn't maintain any of them because interoperability just adds as a fuel for people to leave their game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I fully agree with all of that. And then one last piece of insider information. So I think word through the grapevine was that the valuation of the company was around $300 million. That could, that's what I heard. But could be way more, way less. But I think that it should be around that. Also, given a $40 million raise, it just makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, good. That's pretty much it for today. Anything we're excited about happening?
Yeah, I was going to mention as well, because I'm sometimes a Splinterlands fanboy, I thought it was really interesting, their announcement of the tower defense game. They're also leading up to their big Splinterfest event and all that stuff. But they had just come off the backs of announcing that the soccer game, which was like that was out of left field. But then like they were like a little bit more within their wheelhouse in a way, like announcing this tower defense game. They just announced like just the other day in their town hall this idea that it's tower defense game is not like a big stretch. In fact, when they opened up, like they were asking for other ideas for interoperable games, it was basically like I was one of the first suggestions and I suggested something similar. I don't think they necessarily took my idea. I'm not taking credit or anything, but I just mean like maybe I'm saying it's kind of an obvious idea, like in terms of like if you take the cards. But the part that kind of I thought was odd was that instead of trying to take the cards as they are and translate them into something that makes total sense for the game, the cards themselves are like extra value, like that you can stake into the towers sort of things, like to provide boosts to the game, but they're not interoperable. And so like they're trying to sell new cards and new tower things and stuff like that. And I found that kind of odd because it's like there was a good opportunity for them to take people that had existing cards in Splinterlands and then use them in this game just to increase like the value of Splinterlands cards. But instead they're using this as a way to kind of sell new cards, but also provide a little bit of utility for people that already are in the Splinterlands ecosystem. There's also the cross tokens. Don't get me wrong, like if DEC and SPS like will have utility in this and stuff like that. So there is other stuff besides just the cards. But I thought it was interesting. Like, and we're definitely seeing this trend, right? Like talking about the mini games and the lobby games and stuff. This is more of a post-game game, right? Like, I mean, I know they are still delaying to implement stuff like land and stuff like that, but they're not like crypto unicorns where they're like kind of behind on their core game delivery. They're instead trying to extend out their core game into other things. And I don't know, maybe they're also running into a situation where they aren't doing exciting, cool new stuff enough in their core game that they've got to like try and expand out to other audiences. But to me, this definitely sounds like something where I don't think it's going to bring in new people, and I don't think it's going to retain existing people any better. But it might drive a little initial revenue, and I'm a little skeptical of the overall idea.
Let's see. I am a enormous tower defense fanboy ever since my Warcraft 3 days. Man, I was so good, man. So like these TDs that you could play, so much fun. And so yeah, I'm curious to see what comes out there. Like definitely down to try the tower defense games.
Might as well.
Good. All right. One last call out, shout out. This weekend on the 10th and 11th of September, I will be in Malmö in Sweden because I'm an esports nerd and I'm going to watch the League of Legends Summer Split Finals there. I'm extremely excited. So I've been following that stuff for years now. So there was once like a semifinals here in Brussels, and I didn't go. And also they cast it in French, which is absolutely atrocious, and I don't know why they would do that. Anyway, I followed like the League of Legends esports scene pretty closely. I don't play anymore. I played like 6-7 years ago, but I still follow it, and so I'm excited to go there and watch it and feel it live.
Well, then
Nico, come out to Worlds. We got NA has it this year, right?
Ooh, we do.
Yeah,
Interesting,
sure. Dude. NA in League of Legends is just a meme at this point, you know.
Yeah,
like,
that's why all the international teams will be here. But hopefully the crowds show up. I don't know if it's gonna be quite like Europe, but I hope they show up.
Yeah, that's true. So a few weeks ago, I went to actually a few months ago, I went to a CS:GO final and a championship in Antwerp, and man, like. CSGO is such a good esports game. Like it's so well designed around esports. It's crazy. Just have every round and there's this insane outplay potential. Obviously, like you have boring rounds as well, but the crowd and the energy is just crazy.
Well, I just got to throw out of course a plug for Rainbow Six Siege. Still going with the esports. Still a good esports game.
Dude.
Check it out. New season's about to start. They just had their thing in Berlin. Solid esports as well.
I only watch if Devin casts.
Yeah. So you got to watch VODs from a few years ago.
Good. All right, cool. That's it for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed. Phil and Devin, thank you for joining this